Welcome, 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 family. Welcome to Sidewalk Talk. Welcome. So, we are on our 10th episode of Sidewalk Talk, coming to Netflix very, very soon. Family, welcome to Sidewalk Talk. So, this is an online platform where we have real talk about the streets, right, of Newark, New Jersey to do three things. One, we try to gain insight. Two, we try to clarify misconceptions. And three, we get a call to action from frontline workers, boots on the ground, Newark, New Jersey, right? So we look to gain insight by having nuanced conversations and unpacking truths that aren't actually really even being discussed. Number two, looking to clarify misconceptions about who? Well, we're looking to clarify misconceptions about individuals who are often unheard or misunderstood based on assumptions about their lives. Right? And number three is we try to lift up the work. We try to lift up local organizations, frontline workers, people that are out here doing the work and trying to lift them up so that the work can be discussed in a way that it needs to be and we can learn from each other, but also so that we can get a call to action from those who know best, who have the boots on the ground. Right? Call to action, because at a certain point, it's time. It's time, family, to get a call to action, right? So, I am your host, Aaliyah Berry. For many, some of you may not know me, so let me take this opportunity to introduce myself. So I'm a licensed social worker. I have 20 years experience working with ages 0 to 60 in a variety of different settings. So I've been in daycares and shelters and group homes and schools and correctional facilities, after school programs, summer camps, in a variety of different settings, working with a variety of different individuals. So I'm a community-based social worker. And so what that means to me is this thing is a lifestyle. This thing right here, social work, is a lifestyle, and it doesn't always happen within the four walls of an agency or between the hours of 9 to 5, while following professional boundaries, of course, but this work is not necessarily just within the four walls of an agency. So I find myself at baby showers and graduations, but also, unfortunately, at sentencing hearings and funerals, goal setting at a red light, and getting hugs on the sidewalk. So that is what community-based social work means to me. I currently work as a full-time consultant with Seeds and Berries, where I do strategy work through program development and training in schools, nonprofits, and the government sector. So to keep in touch with me, you can follow Seeds and Berries on Facebook and Instagram, Aaliyah Berry on LinkedIn, and you can find out more about my services and what I do on my website at seedsandberries.com. So if you have missed this episode live, or you want to check out some of the previous episodes that we have done, then please definitely go check out the YouTube channel, which is Seeds and Berries on YouTube. And you can watch some of our previous episodes that we have had with really, really powerful, dope guests, and like and subscribe. So that is enough about me. And, we're ready to kind of move on. Before we do, I have a little bit of housekeeping. Right? I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So if you could, we would like for you to like, tag, and share this broadcast, right? Like, tag, and share this broadcast for impact. So liking and loving and laughing and sad faces and those kinds of reactions throughout our broadcast help my guests and I feel that we're not in a room by ourselves, right? Also, if you know anyone that would be interested in this particular topic tonight, then just tag them in the comments, and you can basically just write their names in the comments, and then they will get a notification that this is happening, and then they can come and join the conversation. The last is to share for impact, right? Share for impact, because my guests and I do have a really important message for the community tonight, and so we do want the message to go far and wide, not for popularity, but for impact. We want it to get in the right hands of the right people, again, just to make a difference, right? The last piece is to comment, right? I can see your comments. My guests can see your comments. So do comment. Let us know where you're here. You're supporting the conversation. Add to the conversation, right? a lot of people that are watching have your own experience. So please, by all means, contribute to the conversation with the things that you have based on your own experience. And you can also feel free to ask questions as well. So that is my housekeeping for today. Like, tag, and share this broadcast for impact. Comment in the comments to add value to the conversation. And that's pretty much it for housekeeping. So moving on to the topic and my guest on tonight. I'm so super excited. So tonight's episode topic is identifying, empowering, and building youth leaders. Yes, all three. Very intentional. Identifying, empowering, and building youth leaders. So this month was Leadership Month on Sidewalk Talk. And so last Saturday we spoke to a youth leader. Her name is Joy Strength. Go check that out on YouTube, that episode, because we needed to understand from a youth's perspective how they feel about leadership. And she is a really powerful youth leader in the community. So we started there speaking to youth about leadership. And so here tonight, I am so excited. I have my personal mentor and longtime friend, Darrell Price. Crowd goes wild. I haven't figured out the clapping and drum rolls and all that. We're gonna grow up to do that. But Darrell Price is here tonight, and so who is Darrell Price? So I'll give the little some bulleted points, but is the site coach at Lead Charter School with the Opportunity Youth Network at the 201 Bergen campus. He has been with YouthBuild Newark since 2004. He was on the founding team of Lead. He has a bachelor's in industrial organizational psychology. I hope I got that right. And working on his master's in nonprofit management. Darrell Price has decades of experience doing this work, working with young people, especially young people who are often misunderstood or unheard, which is Miss Berry's favorite young person as well. And so he has a wealth of knowledge and experience marinating wisdom. This wisdom has been sitting and stewing for a long time, family. So we are here to learn. I hope everybody has their notebooks out because we're going to get into it. And without further ado, Mr. Darrell Price. Welcome.
Thank you, Miss Berry. Thank you for that awesome introduction. I hope I can live up to the billing.
Yes. You were born for this. As we're gonna call him Price because that is how he goes by. So Price, you were born for this, sir. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. So let's get right into it. For the audience members, although we have some audience members in the comments who do already know, they talk about Price. They do already know you. But for the audience members who don't know you, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself.
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief because, again, those people in the chat who know me know, the running joke is that I'm really super old. I got into this work because I was kind of floundering myself. I was a Rutgers college student who really didn't know what I was there for. I didn't know what I was doing. So I was struggling and I kind of stumbled into the work. I started working for the Juvenile Justice Commission maybe in the mid 80s. And I really just found that I love the work. I love young people and I saw a lot of myself in them. And as you said, I've been doing this work for somewhere approaching 26, 27 years. And because I can draw parallels between my own life and theirs, this leadership development piece was really a natural step for me. Although, we'll talk about some of the hurdles that I definitely struggled with in my early years. I see myself in a lot of young people. So I'm able to connect with them directly. And like you said, I've been able to use that skill to be able to work with a lot of really productive programs, YouthBuild Newark in particular, which does a great job with leadership development and then has morphed into Lead Charter School.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that is a great kind of primer, laying the foundation of, again, the decades of experience that you have and what kind of inspired you to do this work. So just to, and I'm going to circle back to the I see myself in young people, because I do just, we have real talk on this platform, right, Price?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to say, and maybe circle back to this if it kind of comes up, which is there's a lot of people that do this work that see themselves in young people and yet don't take the approach that we're going to talk about tonight. And I just want to
Sure.
lift that out, because sometimes we see ourselves in young people and then that leads folks to the savior role. I see myself
Right.
in you, so let me help save you and fix you and let me tell you how to. Okay. And we gonna hit the ground running, Price, because we gotta take this approach that we're gonna talk about today. So to be clear, throughout this conversation, right, family who are watching, we are going to be talking about young people. But this model and these strategies and this approach to leadership can be used from all ages, right? We can do this kind of thing with a 6-year-old. We can do this thing with a 52-year-old. It's just you got to tweak it a little bit. And we'll be using this conversation to talk about youth, but I want to be very clear that it can be used throughout the lifespan. So let's lay the groundwork, Price. Help us understand the model and the lens that you'll be talking about from tonight.
So we'll be talking about young people who are kind of at the bottom of the community totem pole. They're unseen, as you said earlier. They've been disenfranchised, disrespected, disconnected. So they've created their own subculture, and we'll talk about the skills that they can generate from working in that subculture, but they're often very hidden from where we are. They're not the young people who show up bright and early, shiny faced, ready to listen, ready to comply. So they present challenge that looks like it's resistance, but obviously we'll get into why they're presenting that way and what we can do to try to reach them, because that number is enormous, and a lot of us act like that number is really small because we don't see them, but that number is large and it is growing exponentially all the time. And I'm just really so proud that I've been able to be connected to an organization that's looking for them directly to try to work with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the organization Opportunity Youth Network, and you kind of just described the young person, but for those who have never heard the word opportunity youth, help just define that real quick.
So it's the switching from some of these words, right? The disengaged, disenfranchised, right? Those words have a negative connotation. A few years ago, some of the national network that we partner with started to look at calling them opportunity youth, and that's YouthBuild USA. And really, what it aims to do is have folks like in our profession, right, concerned, caring adults, start to look at these young people as a space for production, right, for opportunities for growth, so that they could start looking at themselves differently and not be working from a deficit space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so if there's like a parent that's watching this and saying, well, is my young person an opportunity youth?
Who are they?
Yeah.
Right. So an opportunity youth is somebody who is struggling in the current, I guess, social structure. Let's just use school as the foundation of that, right? So they're not performing well in school. And a lot of times we look at them as being the problem when it could be that the school system is not serving them well, right? I think especially locally, there's a long history of the school systems not working well, but we continue to blame the client, as it were, for the misdeeds of the adults. They could be, participating in other antisocial behavior, whether it's crime on the street, drug use. Because they have been unseen, they slide into antisocial behavior because that is where they can be seen. They can be with peers who get them, right? People who get them, and they can be acknowledged and heard. And that's because that's really all they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so that's a great segue to our next question in regards to being seen and wanting to be seen and not being seen, or seeing the wrong stuff in me because I'm presenting certain stuff. So again, tonight's topic, we're talking about identifying, empowering, and building youth leaders. And all three of those we chose very specifically. So let's start with identify, right? So whether it's in schools, nonprofits, the sidewalk, the doctor's office, your home. And I just want to bring everyone in the audience into this conversation, because just because you don't work in a school doesn't mean this is not relevant to you, right? So we see a young person and we see certain behaviors, right, Price?
Right.
We see certain
Yep.
behaviors, and we either sometimes overlook those behaviors or we misunderstand those behaviors. And then leadership, you want who to do what? You want them to be a leader, but their behaviors are looking like this. Tell us about what kinds of behaviors we often overlook or misunderstand, and how that can be tied to leadership.
Well, you raised the point that this is really about all young people, right? And the processes that we go through to learn about the world and ourselves in that world. And I'll use my son as the primary frame, because I want to say too that I practice this with my older son, as you well know, right? But it's not a perfect system, so it doesn't always work. So he is 14 and he is looking to find himself. Some of that is resistance, right? It's just resistance to the culture, resistance to the standards, resistance to organizational paradigms, right? So his thing right now is he wants to grow his hair. I'm a Caesar kind of dude, right? So we've been having this 2-year fight about whether I should let him grow his hair or not. But in thinking about youth development, I have to give him an opportunity to express himself. And then I have to allow myself to understand what the expression means, right? And so then let's segue to students who we think are a little bit further along the disengagement spectrum. So when they come to us and they don't want to take their hats off, they want to sag their pants, they want to dress a certain way, all of those things are expressions of individuality that then we label as antisocial. And as soon as you attack those things, then young people, they hold on to them more strongly because they need to find a way to identify themselves. So instead of jumping on immediately like, yo, you can't wear your hat in the space, there has to be a rationale about why you can't do it. And then now let's jump to what we do at LEAD. You have to understand that what you're doing now is that you're preparing yourself for something that comes later, right? So you can be antisocial for a little while, right? And again, we understand that that's part of your development, but after a while, you're going to want a job where you're going to need to have a certain level of compliance, right? You can put your hat on after you get out, right? And again, those who are in this meeting who know me know that I wear my hat backwards almost every day that I'm not working. Right? That's who I am.
Yes.
But I do know how to switch. And what we try to do is teach young people the value of the switch. Right. So there's a rationale about why you need to do it that, again, answers the being unseen and unheard. Right. So we're going to talk about why we need to make these changes and give you time to practice those changes in a safe space so that it's not like you have to flip a switch, but you get an understanding of why you need to do it. And then there are some staged opportunities for you to practice in space.
Mm-hmm. So I hear you and we've said this on some other episodes as well, but I want to frame it in this topic is that, what is underneath behaviors? What is underneath behaviors? And so you just described many, many things that are underneath a refusing to remove my hat, that are underneath it. And oftentimes we don't look at that and we don't explore the roots underneath behaviors. And then what you said, but you didn't use these words, but I'm going to use these words on purpose, which is that young person is defiant and non-compliant. And those two words on purpose, unmotivated, disrespectful, didn't take their hat off right? And some of those words, defiance, non-compliance, resistance, unmotivation, motivated, lead to punitive measures even. And then further engagement.
Right. And, we talk about the, schools being a pathway to incarceration, which you and I have talked about at length, privately. That's the start of the process. You get identified as being other, right? And again, I have to jump back to my son. My son, I was going to buy him some black Air Force Ones a couple of weeks ago to go to a funeral. That was my concession that he didn't have to have shoes. He says to me, nah, Dad, I can't buy those. That's thug shoes. When I go to school, they're going to think I'm a thug. Like, yeah. Like that's how people still labeling folks. But that's real. So you go into these pro-social spaces because this society is telling you that schools and these places are pro-social. you get labeled as negative or antisocial, and then you go down this pathway where you're constantly being challenged, and you have a choice to make. Either you're gonna get down or lay down. Right. And then if I'm strong-willed, right, and this is how we segue into leadership. If I'm strong-willed, I'm not just going to lay down. I'm going to defend what I believe has value for me. And then then now we're having a value contest, but we never have the conversation about what the difference is in the values. There's never a common understanding, and it's just about who's going to win. And, in the school systems, in formal settings, authority, i.e. adults, are going to be able to win that because I can push you out.
And so then let's talk about that moment in time right there and how that then can transition to leadership. Like, how do you see this as, seeing this behavior, teaching code switching, seeing the young person's response to the, skill building, if you will, right? And what you said was like kind of resisting and strong-willed. How does that then trigger your, not to say alarm, but to say this young person right here is a really dope leader? How does that work in your head? Like, what is the formula that goes from this to this to this in your head?
So I had something I had to learn, and I'll have to refer back to our founder, Robert Clark, who taught me this lesson many, many years ago now. And I'll try to be brief with the story, but it's something that I refer to a lot. There was a young man in our first year who came to school every day. He came to the program every day. He participated well. He just didn't comply. So he was always just enough out of compliance to get under my skin. And I came from correctional setting, which was like full compliance or get out. So that I didn't understand what the nuances were at the time. And even though, again, he was performing across all parameters, he was performing fine. He just got on my nerves, quite honestly. And we were taking our first inaugural student picture. It's very important to me that, we capture this moment for posterity, and I'm looking for smiling faces. And he stood on the end purposefully, even though then I asked him to move to the middle, and we started to have this contest, this battle of wills. And he stands on the end. He's only going to stand on the end. And then when the photographer is taking the picture, he won't look at the camera. We talk about it a couple times in open space. And at the time, back then I was a little bit more aggressive than I am now, right? So I feel like, I gotta kick him out, or I gotta turn his head somehow physically. So something gotta happen. So I go to Mr. Clark's office, and I've had enough of this young man. Rob, I can't take this dude anymore. He's defiant now. He is being defiant. So Rob goes in, he coordinates the picture. He takes it with the young man looking away. So he concedes that. I'm very angry about the concession. Go back in his office at the end of the day. Let me talk to you about the wild cult is the theory that he imparted on me. So the wild cult is strong-willed, right? Usually physically strong and strong-willed, right? And needs to understand why it's doing something. He tells me that he turns it back on me and says, Price, he doesn't trust us enough to give his full self to the program, even though he's coming regularly, he's getting things, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, but when such and such asked him to do something, and when at the construction site they asked him to do something, he does everything they were asking him to do, right? They were going to hire him, and they did hire him for 2 years as part of our construction team after his graduation. But it's about me. So I had personalized. There's something about you, Price, as the head of the program that he doesn't believe in. You have to figure out what that is by just asking him. But the ask then feels like, for folks who don't understand the power dynamic, it feels like you're lowering yourself. But what you're doing is you're doing parallel process. Right? If a young person doesn't understand us, we fully expect them to talk about it, right? So I'm in my early YouthBuild learning. So I come home, I'm really struggling with it. I don't know why I have to do it. I don't know how to do that. So it probably took a couple of days, and I started to talk to this young man from the position of, I need to understand how I can get you to believe in this model more, and thereby me, right? I'm the face of the model. And he said, Price, sometimes you do things that I think are shady. What? What do I do that's shady? Right? I'm super positive all day. But in reality, I was learning how to be a youth development professional, especially back then. And we don't understand that young people are watching us all the time. So he's making value judgments about me all the time. So did I say something that was counter to what I said? Did I say something in private that was counter to what I said in public? So I had to go back and reflect. But just the opportunity that I gave him to say what he needed to say to me, then able to come back and say, well, you know what? There are some things that I think I could grow from here. I'm going to work on that, my dude. Changed his whole dynamic. Now, like I said, he went on to become an intern with us over 2 years, right? He helped us build out the program in over a couple of summers when we were doing a lot of really concrete physical building. And he referred young people to us over a number of years, right? A number of years. You're talking about 5, 6, 7 years we're getting referrals from this young man because I was able to show this young man that I could see him, hear him, and respond appropriately. He was able to, I was able to change the leadership dynamic for him, and he became a really, really strong advocate for our programming. And that's a lesson that I carry with me all the time, and I try to make sure that I'm listening myself, but I'm also challenging the folks who work with me directly to listen very clearly to young people and what they're saying, and even sometimes try to find the cues underneath. Because you talk to me about the trauma that young people manifest and have to suffer through, how they bring that trauma is they're not always going to say, I've been through these 4 or 5 traumas and here's how I'm suffering. They're going to be angry, right? They're going to be, like you said, defiant. They're not going to want to participate in group sessions. And we have to toe a fine line between getting them to participate in something that we know is going to be beneficial and kind of nudging them towards that understanding on their own without exclusion.
Absolutely. With that story, I super want to skip to us talking about providers' approach. I am going to circle back because I do want to quickly just kind of finish the empowering and building piece of it. But then this particular sidewalk talk, we really did want to talk about providers and our approach to the thing, because what you said was listen to young people. You would have had nothing to hear had you not asked him.
Right.
And asking him why you don't like me, right, takes a lot of courage and vulnerability.
Yes. And again, just full transparency, coming from working in juvenile corrections, I felt like a sucker. I felt like I was being played in my 20s. I really had to eat some humble pie to be able to do that. But when I saw that it worked, that was the key to the leadership development kingdom. For me.
Eat some humble pie to get to the key to the leadership kingdom. I mean, because it does take courage and vulnerability to ask a young person, especially, and I also want to throw this piece in here just so we don't forget later, but seeking supervision. Was another big part of that story, because you could have just taken the picture of the group, bruh not looking at the camera over and over and over again, right? Forget him. This picture's still going, wherever it's going, and I don't know what's up with him, but all these other young people want it, and I guess he just doesn't. But he is performing in these other spaces, but seeking supervision for those people who, and you are one of those people now, but at that time, seeking supervision from folks that are doing this work, that know this work, and at the times that we don't, we need to seek supervision. So I just want to speak on that. So empower, right? So you identified, looking at certain behaviors, understanding how these behaviors can make great leaders if caressed in the right way. I don't want to say manipulated because it's not quite that.
Cultivated is the word that I like to use. Right?
Yep. And so then you're ready to cultivate a young person. So empowering is a step, and it's not necessarily an easy step. The identifying is one thing, but then if we're moving on to empowering, Is that easy? Is that hard? What kind of barriers do you find when trying to then empower a young person to embrace leadership?
Got it.
Especially the kinds of young people we're talking about.
Right. So let me just frame this by saying that most forms of leadership outside of, again, these pro-social spaces is done through, physical force, fear, right? Anger
What do
is
you
a
mean
is
by
a
that?
usual tool.
What do you mean by that? Well, give an
By
example.
which piece? Oh, so well, again, when I worked in corrections, we used to do this all the time, and I, as a 50-year-old, I'm pretty embarrassed to say this. You take your physically strong, and your verbally aggressive young people, you lift them up to leadership, and they will get other young people in line because other young people are afraid of them. Like it's just like this, that's basic human, like human frailty is that you're going to use the, survival of the fittest. And it never allowed, in retrospect, it never allowed the quieter, more reticent young people to thrive in that system. But it's expedient, which is what most professionals are looking for in these, in these pseudo leadership development opportunities. But if it's really going to work, you have to be patient with it. You have to obviously, like you said, recognize the skill, right? Whether, however the young person generated that skill is still a skill. And then you have to lift them up to a space to practice. And then you also have to be comfortable and patient enough with them to make mistakes. In our space now, what you get a lot of times is I'm going to try to say run our morning meeting session. And as soon as young people do what they do to us, they do it to each other. They're going to disengage. They don't want to share. Then the leader gets angry, and there's a demonstration of anger. The staff's usual response to that is to jump in and support, right? So, we're not going to let them look like a bad leader, but sometimes you have to, right? They have to take a project, and morning meeting in that case is the project, and they have to fumble it a little bit so that they can learn. Your job is to pull them out after morning meeting is over. Hey, when Johnny said that they didn't want to say their feeling, and you offered them to the bathroom as a an extreme example, probably not the best way to go to maintain leadership. Right? That's
For
not
clarity for the
longitudinal
audience,
leadership.
trying to fight Johnny. For
Right.
clarity
Right.
for the
Right.
audience, right?
Sorry about that.
No, sometimes I gotta break it down for the audience.
Or you say something that's degrading to that person to get them to motivate. Like this, so let's pull out. Let's look at the full structure. Let's look at what happened. How did you come into the space? What could you have done differently? And then in that case, the young person is taking tangible lessons from that leadership opportunity, right? If not, then it's episodic and they don't really there's no real learning that happens, or the learning is so protracted that you can't really extract anything from that. And I'll have to tell another story here. In our previous working together, we set the table, I think, very well, you and I, to have young people very emotional about the norms that the school was going to use, right? And it was a full group meeting, staff involved as well. And it was myself and the school leader at the time, and we were observing. You had a discussion about what the norms were going to be. They were making a list of norms that the school was going to adopt. And these are probably the two young men who are going to be able to enforce these norms through the strength of their character. They are moving close to each other, physically moving close to each other. They are yelling, right? And at one point, they balled their fists while they were still arguing about norms. I was sitting with the school leader, and I said to him at that moment, look at your team. Look in the room, look across the room at your team. You had people literally looking like they were ready to sprint into the space to stop these two young men from having a discussion about norms. Now, am I saying that they should be physically fighting over the norms? No. But if that's the tool that our young people know how to use best, right? How far can we let them go to learn how to use different tools by, again, allowing them to get to a space where we say, okay, well, we've gotten far enough here. What are we really arguing about? And what are these feelings that are being generated from this process? Because all of it was around making the school better. The two norms that they were arguing about both had value to the school space. They were just in disagreement about which one had more value. right? So there is always the potential for messiness, right, or a negative outcome, but we have to let it play so that young people can pull back, debrief, and learn lessons. Too often we save them because we really, in my own personal opinion, we really don't trust that they have the skill set to be able to do what we're asking them to do. So they're gonna mess our programs up because they just don't know any better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I hear like a lot of patients. I hear during the empowerment stage, there's very untraditional ways to get there to the piece. To there's untraditional ways to get to leadership. So once a young person embraces leadership, and you've already kind of spoke about this a little bit, is just like how the programmatic framework and caring adults support maintaining the momentum. Because then, for example, let's say the morning meeting youth leader, Johnny didn't say his feeling. They won't stop talking, Miss Berry. I already yelled for them to stop, right? Like, I've already practiced enough. This is aggravating. I don't even like leadership. These kids don't listen. I don't want no parts of this. How do we build and maintain the momentum of practicing? Because, yes, the practice part can be very messy and discouraging and like an emotional roller coaster, even for the young person. How do we keep them not only connected but committed to trust the process?
So there have to be mechanisms that we can use to measure their efficacy and whatever their effort is, right? So one of the things that we're doing really well, I think now, is making sure that there's something that they can double back to. So you talk about a debrief, right? So in your example, or our example, the young person didn't do a great job in managing morning meeting. They feel deflated, they feel discouraged, they're angry. Let's double back to the leadership paradigms that we're practicing here. How did you do this one? Oh, I did that one pretty good, right? I got everybody here on time. We got the circle clear, right? So I did that one good, check. This one here, right? Developing relationships, not so strong here. What can I do to get better at that? So then you can break down specifically what the challenges are. And it's not just, oh, you messed that up. Let's try it again tomorrow. The young person needs feedback, just like just like everybody does, around what they were doing well, what they were not doing well. And we want to come at it again from a strength-based position. So the professionals in the space need to, so that's where you demonstrate your patience. If the morning meeting gets messed up for a couple of days in a row because you're working on something, ultimately that's fine, as long as the leadership piece is really being worked through. And then, like after a week, then we say, okay, well, let's pass this leadership piece on to somebody else. But you got a full assessment with that individual young person that his or her counselor can work through to say, okay, let's examine the week. Let's look at how we did on our skill sets, right? Everybody has an individual development plan with us, so that's woven into the individual development plan. You made some progress here. We got to do some work and double back on this. We'll give you another chance to run morning meetings, say 3 weeks from now, right? What can you do in the meantime to work on those areas of skill building, right? As relationship management or relationship development. Do you go back to those people in class, right? And say, hey, I know I didn't really handle that well when you were going against the grain, but I need to understand why you were doing that so that maybe I can do a better job of supporting you, right? Then it gives a young person something to work on. And it's not just this giant amorphous thing that's either you do it well or you don't, right? They need feedback so that they can really hone specific skills. Mm-hmm. And then that's my other piece, is that they need something to be measured on specifically. And we had a great meeting just yesterday where we're going to be able to now lift up a young person's leadership development paradigms, like the things that they're specifically working on and how they're doing in those things, so that everybody can see what's being worked on specifically for each individual young person.
Right. So it's tailored, it's individualized, but I also hear it is a framework that is being referenced. It's measurable, yes. It's concrete and tangible, all that.
Yes.
The other piece, and somebody wrote this in the comments, is just the fact that and this goes a little bit back to the empowerment piece. If the empowerment piece is not done well, then it's hard to build and maintain momentum, because she says some don't believe they have the skill set. And that's a part after the identify. it's like, okay, well, Price thinks I'm a leader. And I've said this, specifically in the correctional facility where I work, and starting an inmate to inmate mentoring program behind the wall. Like, I'm huge on leadership, as we know. Like, it's in our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what we do. And so to bring that in there, I'll never forget, like, he was a young person, but he was like a young adult saying, Miss Berry, like, ain't nobody ever seen leadership in me. A leader, right? Like, I've done bad things. I'm a bad person. And he didn't say that, but I've heard that from many. And so it's like, you see positive leadership in me. Like, and yes, right? And I'm not the only one that saw that, because what I told him immediately when he said that, yeah, people did see it in you. And he's like, who? The streets. What you mean? Like, you had leadership when you were 6. Yep. And I said that to Joy, our guest on the last Sidewalk Talk. Sis, I know they were following you around on the playground at 6, at 7. Yep. And then, like, with some of the population we work with, then, like, by 12, 13, 14, you're jumping off the porch. But you had power. It's just a matter of using it for positive. But then what the sister said in the comments, some don't believe they have the skill set. I've done bad things. I'm a bad person. I can't do positive leadership. What you looking at me saying I could be a leader? It's, yeah, okay. Right? But then you convincing them. And then to your point, in the building piece of it, it gets messy and it can impact their confidence. So they're like, see, I told you I couldn't be a positive leader.
Right.
Right.
So that's all a part of the growth process, right? So the roller coaster of success and failure is a part of learning, right? And that's, you brought in this to all the young people, right? And that is a part of the learning process. There has to be some hurt. But for the population of young people that we're talking about, they have had to practice pro-social behavior in negative ways, right? Our founder always talks about their survival skills, right, being transitioned into leadership, right? And once you can help a young person see that, and you have to see it through practice, right? And it starts as soon as they come in. Young people, when they're coming in and filling out applications, and we're much more in a virtual space than we've ever been. But you remember the days when we were talking, a young person would come in with their parent, and because the young person had done really poorly in high school before, the parent was filling out the application. Is there an assumption that the young person can't read well enough to even do that part on their own? So we try to change the paradigm right there. That young person needs to do that for themselves. Oh, well, they don't read so good. That's fine. We need to start assessing now what their skill set is. Mm-hmm. And it's not about, we need to find out how well Johnny can read necessarily, but it's really how hard is Johnny willing to work to get better? Mm-hmm. And then once we can find those skills, because we're always looking for the skill base, right? Then we can start to pull up opportunities to utilize those skills in a pro-social way. And then you're talking about frequent small opportunities to point out and say, like, you did a really good job with that piece, right? And say, using our construction sites, using our classrooms to be able to give folks concrete opportunities that are small but important, right? They have to have value. But then at the end of the day, there's a debrief that says, oh, you did a really good job in making sure that we got all the tools back in and that they were counted properly. You might have a skill set that, that's project management at its ground floor, right? How do we develop that? So it's there's a young man who works for us now who I'm borrowing his phrase a lot these days. He's talking about multiple at bats. Young people need many, many opportunities at leadership and debrief so that they can practice and hone the skills so that they can feel confident in moving into an area of the world really that is super foreign to them.
Yeah.
Now, you're not just going to dump kids at Rutgers and be like, hey, go to class. Because they're fighting with all of these, self-worth challenges from what they've heard, from what they've experienced. But these youth development spaces, right, organizations, schools, communities, groups have to give young people opportunity to practice. And then you have to debrief that practice so that they can go home on a given day with the feeling of like, yeah, I'm getting better at this.
Right. So we're going to shift, right? And I'm going to take pieces of what you just said in order to shift, right? Because the topic, identify, empower, and build youth leaders. But now, so we've been talking a lot about the young people, right? And for those who are watching that know Darrell Price, we are not going to conclude a sidewalk talk without, bringing a mirror. And this is real talk, nuanced conversations, unpacking truths that are not often being discussed here on Sidewalk Talk, right? But truths that need to be told, right? We're not speaking specifically, we're speaking in general, but some of these things, Sidewalk Talk has often taken the mirror and let's look at ourselves. So a couple things you said, and this is how I'm going to shift it to us, the providers, us, the programs, right? Us, the mentors on the sidewalk, right? It's not necessarily, again, you don't even have to work in a school. You could be a parent that's listening to this and looking for leadership in your child. So, it's not just school, but looking at ourselves as the adults, right? I heard you say a little while back, you said, oh, well, morning meeting might be messed up for a couple days and that's okay, is what you said. And I heard staff say in their own head, no, it's not okay, Price. No, it's not okay. Morning meeting has fallen apart for 3-4 days in a row because you, right? And I have personally experienced what I'm talking about, which is like, our peers not always like believing in the process we're engaged in with a young leader. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking in general, but that's a tough position to be in when you're vouching for a young leader who is in the messy figuring it out stage. That's a thing. Yeah. But no, it's not okay that morning meeting is falling apart, right? Mom filling out the application and no, he needs to be able to do it himself. That's uncomfortable. That's discomfort for mom, right? The patience about taking the opportunity to say, I really love the way you collected all those tools and counted it. That takes time and intentionality. And I hear you describing through this whole process a ton of patience.
Yep.
What do we say to the providers, the parents, the program leaders, the mentors on the sidewalk? I don't have time for all that. That takes a lot of extraness. I don't have time for that.
So, and again, you know me very well, and I think the people I just took a peek at who's listening right now, they know me very well. Then youth development is not for you. Right? This is not the work. It is messy all the time, right? And I've even been thinking about as we've changed from program to charter school, some of our program dynamic, like our students have changed a little bit. So they're not super gritty right now, right? Some of them are super quiet, right? And you think about, we have two brothers who are achieving at super high levels, but we're just getting them to talk in morning meeting at this point, right? And this is 2 years of work, right? Are they leaders? Yes, right? Because staff has been patient with them and asked them to take the steps that they need from where they are to demonstrate the level of role modeling that is necessary to be able to lift them up as leaders, right? And I see Mr. Adams putting, what he put about the vomit, right?
That's his line.
We have to, so you talk about what do the professionals need? We have to really believe that it's possible for a young person who has fallen well behind the pace of his peers or her peers, that they have skills, and that not only can they demonstrate leadership, but they can use that leadership as a vehicle to help them catch up to their peers, or maybe even surpass, right? We have examples of young people who were well behind their graduating classes and then have superseded them in terms of output on the back end, jobs, company creations, the whole nine. There's also the challenge of personal control that a lot of folks are uncomfortable talking about. And again, what I learned in as a really, really young man in the Juvenile Justice Commission was that you had to have control. Control is paramount. So I worked on that, right? I worked hard on it and I got pretty good at it. But this model, right, if you're really going to work with young people and you're going to give them leadership, you have to give up some of that control. I would say a large portion of that control. Right. So when it's done well, and we talk about this all the time, the challenge is whether we can reach it or not, is when the program is running on its own. Things are happening. Morning meeting is happening on time, right? Young people are going to the spaces that they need to, CTE, right? They're going to their work site, they're going to classes, they're going to assigned meetings, right? And that's in our SOP, right? Assigned meetings is a part of their requirement. Then we have done the right work in leadership development to get them engaged enough, believing enough, and empowered enough to do what I think a lot of folks have come to understand as the work, which is driving young people everywhere. And then you're going to celebrate success when they've reached your internal benchmarks, but they're not really prepared to do anything else. That's really a crime in terms of processing, because all you've done is you've given a young person a piece of paper, whether it be high school diploma, HSE, or certification. They're not prepared to really do anything with it. So then they're going to rely on you for the rest of their lives. Right? And that's not what we signed up to do. And we have to work much harder, I think, across the board. And, that includes us in really assessing how much control we are comfortable with giving to young people, and how much time, to your point, can we allot to debrief with them so that they can become better citizens, right? Like LEAD's model is designed to help young people become better citizens, not just high school graduates or certificate attainers, but better people, right? So that's the goal of youth development. So if I have personal challenges, right, and we got to be really clear, and I know we're running out of time, but a lot of times professionals learn how to hide their own deficiencies in program policies, right? So then it's that I can't do this because of these other things, right? I can't do that because the policy says that I can't, right? Or there's not enough time because the schedule dictates that there's not enough time. Right. But if you send, again, going back to the morning meeting analogy, if you send a young person away from a morning meeting to math class, as an example, without debriefing when they had a really, really rough morning meeting, you're doing them a disservice. And then when 4 days later they stop coming to school, you blame them for their lack of motivation when there's a systematic challenge to be had. Right. And you ignored it rather than addressing what that young person needs in terms of skill building to get them ready to take on what comes next. Yes. Right. And that's the area of challenge, I think, for a lot of us. And I'd be very frank that it's folks hide in that because then it lifts up your own personal failings. Right. And I'll go back to the situation with the young man from year one at YouthBuild. I had, just again, full transparency, I had honed a tough image in my juvenile correctional 10 years or whatever I was working there. Right. And as a young man, I'm light skinned, curly haired. Dudes in correctional facilities used to try to take shots at me. Right. Talk slick. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. So I got tough. So toughness was something that I worked on hard. If I wasn't able to listen to Clark in that moment and then bring myself down to parallel process with that young man, I would have steamrolled his experience in program. And who knows what would have happened to him. And every time we look at a young person who is not producing, right, and we don't even have to say failing, not producing according to the schedule that we've prescribed, we got to ask ourselves, what are we doing that is keeping that young person potentially from doing what they need to do? And it's, sometimes too, it's, you mentioned it in the beginning, sometimes it's that we want to do too much. Right. And for whatever reason. Right. So I came up in the same way. So I know how hard it was. So I don't want you suffering the way that I'm suffering. Or I came from the suburbs and I have this, Oedipus complex, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to save all these little poor children. Right. We cripple them doing those things. But we have to be clear with one another about what drives us personally to the work, so that and then when we get challenged about these things around the development, that we understand that those are quite honestly personal challenges. And we need to take stock in that, because we're asking young people to grow exponentially, right? You're asking an antisocial, disengaged, disenfranchised young person functioning on really low levels in all measures, right, to all of a sudden in a year and a half, pull their pants up, tuck their shirt in, and cut their hair and go get a job. Right.
Yes.
Right. But without all the inputs, and then we say, oh, this, Johnny just didn't want it.
Right.
And then we wipe our hands with that, and then we try to find a shiny penny, as Clark used to always tell me, that we can then work with and feel good about.
Right.
But they all have skills, they all have strengths, and they all deserve the same at bat, to my man, Mr. Walker's analogy, they all deserve opportunities to try to lead. Like, because you never know what could be the opportunity that might help a young person really see what we see in them. So you never know what that opportunity is. So everybody needs it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. The last piece that I want to bring up in regards to looking at ourselves, and you did kind of say this, but I want to pull it out and really just call it for what it is too, is sometimes as I think providers, we become very, very task driven. Right. Mm-hmm. And whether that's teachers, mentors, nonprofit schools, the government sector, like it schedules, task driven. And, you know, in the defense of providers, a lot of times these tasks are connected to outcomes. Yes. And outcomes are connected to funding.
Yes.
And like funding serves the young people and keeps everyone employed. I mean, at the end of the day, like these things kind of need to be said out loud. However, what I hear you kind of talking about is, one, matching your outcomes to this leadership process. Yes. And then also, just my brain is starting to look at more macro level data, strategy, measuring these kinds of things, is if you want to do leadership in your program, not yours because you guys rock out, but anyone who's watching this, is to make sure to create your outcomes to match the leadership framework, and so that you can measure even Johnny rocked out leading morning meeting for 3 out of 5 days. Mm-hmm. And the 2 days it didn't go well, but how can we measure the 3 days that it went well? How can we measure from where Johnny came from to where he is now? How can we measure that gradual process? How can we measure the journey of transformation? Right. Because if you can measure the journey of transformation and you can get funding through outcomes along that journey, then you don't have to rush to send Johnny to math class, because this debrief is an outcome.
Right.
I mean, the how much time to an outcome.
How much time we have to talk about that?
We're good. Like, we always go a little 10, 15 minutes over. We need to feel complete, Price. We need to feel
No, I got it. No, because that's probably the most salient thing that I've ever heard. Something that we think about a lot. I think that also, and I appreciate that you said that we rock out, that I think that piece, that thinking helps us to get better, right? It helps us to be more patient, right? We like to use sports analogies. There's a lot of sports folks at Lead. So it slows the game down, right? And you're not just racing to these outcomes. Mm-hmm. But what it takes is it takes really dedicated leadership, right? And I have to give a shout out to Clark in this one. And again, I've been around forever, so I've been able to watch him do this. I've watched Komisanyas do it. I've tried to practice it myself. Is when you talk about the funder, right? Does the funder really understand what we're trying to do? And the honest truth is, right? The truth is, most of the time they really don't, right? They have an idea, but they're off somewhere else. They're moving money, right? They're trying to change the world from a different perspective. And usually what programs do is then you tailor your program model to meet those outcomes,
right?
Which I think is a common choice, but I think a mistake in terms of leadership development. Leadership development is usually the first thing that gets sacrificed when you make that choice. But what I've watched Clark do, what I've watched Komisanyas do, what I've tried to do again myself and other leadership, Jasmine, right, is engage with the funder, right, the monitor, and consistently talk to them about what the youth development paradigm does to the outcomes.
Yes.
Right. So right, you're watching them force the youth development model into the discussion, and then slowly but surely, and depending on the funder, it takes some years, then the model starts to appear in the funding stream.
Right.
Now, right, then like you said, then now there are youth development paradigms in the money.
Yes.
So now you're answering the right questions, right? And then you can drill back to the staff and say, okay, now we have a much more concrete rationale to spend time on these pieces. And again, I had to make note of that because it's something that not many folks can do, right? It takes an extreme amount of fortitude, right? I have watched all of the people I mentioned. I've experienced it myself. Get laughed at. Funding streams close up on us about it. Doors closed, right? And we continue to step up to the plate and say, these young people deserve an opportunity, even though they have all of these disses. And here is the model that will get them to a space where they can be competitive citizens, right? But you have to do the model, which means that then the funder, right, has to buy the full model. And we've been able to, I think, stay successful and grow because of that work. Yeah. Right. That makes it easier for me at my level to be the folks call me the guru of youth development in our little circle. Yes. Because I get the freedom to do that because they do that administrative work above me or behind me, next to me, however you want to look at it, to make sure that I have the freedom to do that, right? That allows the quarterback to go on the field and slow the game down and improvise a bit based on a framework. Yeah. Right. I can fool around on the field because I know that I have people above me who are saying like, yo, you got 3 weeks to make this work. Yeah. Right. And instead of like, yo, that needs to be right now. Yes. Right. Then you can train the staff who are going to do the day-to-day differently than you would otherwise, because then everybody's just driving towards outcomes. But that's a huge challenge, because every time you try to expand, there's a different set of people that you have to convince of the same thing. Yeah. Right. So I have to applaud them for giving me and folks like me, Adams, right, like me, to be able to have that space and freedom to be able to push and pull and prod everybody in the community, right? Because if this is going to work well, young people need to be challenged to grow, staff need to be challenged to grow, so that everybody can lift, right? We can lift this paradigm together. Because when it works, and I remember the that big poster that I had when we were working together at the other school, right? So that we can work through the mess together, right, as a full community, and then we can get to that beauty on the end where young people are walking across the stage or earning certifications, and they're not only just doing that to go back to the block, but they're doing that to go to different spaces and really compete and become productive folks, right? It's always beautiful to us to be able to see young people. I just had a text conversation with a young lady that you know very well, who has had to make some tough decisions, but she is making now concrete decisions based on data, right? Based on information that's happening around her. I need to do this, Price, because this is happening, right? Her job is being challenged because of COVID, right? Price, I got to come back to New Jersey because these 5 things have happened. And she texted me today, I need to meet with you so that you can help me to look at these next 5 things that I want to do. She didn't come to me and say like, yo, I need you to fix me, right? I'm ready to give up. I have a strategy, Price, that I need to talk to you about. Right. Let's do that. Let's create a new plan together. Right. That's the goal of leadership development. You want young people who can exit our programs prepared to take the mantle with us, from us, to be able to take this, this improving our communities thing on and carry it to the next level. Right. And if they can't, then we haven't served them. We haven't.
Right. And so but that's an example of a long-term impact, right? Like the long game. If we have not, throughout this Sidewalk Talk episode, if y'all have not got the fact that this is a long game, this is a long game, right? And so some of those outcomes, to your point, are found further down the road. Yes. But I also just want to salute the leaders that you did mention, because that advocacy, that commitment to advocating for youth development and leadership in tables and spaces that aren't necessarily always receptive to it, see behaviors and have no idea what's under the behaviors or how that leads to leadership. And so those folks that you did mention, just committing and by any means necessary, committing. Like you said, funding streams, closing up. Okay, then we find a new one that believes in this. You know what I mean? Like, you just got to keep going. You got to keep going. And earlier you talked about the young person who messes up morning meeting. And when we don't debrief with him, he doesn't come back to school. That's an outcome, right? So now, like, if you're not debriefing and sending someone straight to math class, now your attendance is dropping on that young person. Well, wasn't that an outcome? Like, or like if diplomas is an outcome, leadership helps get to diplomas. If employment, workforce development, healthy families, healthy relationship dynamics. I mean, lots of skills that leadership helps young people accomplish. So all of that is a matter of how you look at outcomes and what do you have time for in your day? What do you have time for? How flexible is the schedule? I heard you say, right? What are we getting funded for? How can we, measure the journey of transformation to keep this funding intact, to be flexible like you are, and being allowed to be flexible, because that's upper management, right? Yes. Upper management gives us, and I know from being there, flexibility to do right by young people, right? Yes. So I appreciate all that, Price. I would say the last question before we get the call to action. I mean, there's tons of call to action in here, but the last question is just like rapid fire is, if you do this, you're showing young people that like you want to check off a leadership box, but you don't really want them to lead.
Got it.
What's a thing that someone can do and they're like, oh wait, I do that. Maybe I should not do that come Tuesday. like.
So I think a mistake that a lot of folks make in terms of kind of mechanisms of leadership is that you give young people stuff that they are clear really matters very little to the dynamic of what's happening in the space, right? And again, we'll keep doubling back to this morning meeting idea. Morning meeting to us is super important. And for years, we used to fight about that only the program director could run, only the principal of the school could run morning meeting. Like it was like it was so important that only that person could do it. So we only give, well, not only, but we strive to give them things that are centrally important to what we're doing. And I have lots of examples of that. You're talking about staff sitting in on new hires of new staff people. You're talking about
wait, I'm sorry. Staff. You let students and young people into the interviews at your program?
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
I know
that. And we've had feedback. We have, so say there are 6 of us on a panel interviewing somebody, and they go through a very extensive rubric with us. And, like I would hazard to say that young person or 2 or 3's feedback is just as valuable as mine is or Coleman Science's is, right? Because they're going to be the ones who are going to be receiving this person, right? We have let staff go. In our earlier iterations when we were, just DOL program around the student request, right? If there's a bad fit, then young people are going to tell us if we empower them to, and then we need to respond to that.
Right.
But we try to weave leadership into every component of program.
But actually, like that, let's just go off that example, and then we'll see how to kind of like support this work and refer them. But like as an example for staff to say, yeah, we really care what you think about our staff, right? But if you're not letting me into the interview, right?
It's not real.
Exactly. Then it's not real. Right. So for whatever the audience members are watching to say, yeah, like we do leadership. I value leadership in my young people. How are you showing them? Does it release, as Price said earlier, does it release power and control? Does it relinquish power and control? Are you scared the whole program is going to fall apart and you won't meet your outcomes if you let young people run it? Right? Are we checking our own ego? Are we being sincere in really offering them these opportunities? Do we have patience? Do we really value their leadership? Right? And to ask ourselves all these questions. So, Price, how do we as the audience, what is our call to action regarding supporting your work? How do we, I ask all my guests, how do we support your work?
So our work can be supported directly by spreading the word about what we do, checking into our model. It is, and not because I've been around it for half of my life, it is a dynamic, youth-centered, engaging environment that really helps young people find themselves and not just the, like not just the super, what we would call delinquent young person who's so far, gone that you think that this is the only route, right? If a young person is looking for something different, right? If they're looking to engage differently, if they're looking to be heard, LEAD is the space for them, right? LEAD, YouthBuild Newark, OYN, like we're cultivating spaces for young people to be engaged in. And we need to spread that word. I think there's no secret that the pandemic and the quarantine have challenged everybody into some really difficult emotional spaces. Mm-hmm. And LEAD really is the perfect space to help young people, again, maybe refine some of themselves, because it shows an extreme amount of love, an extreme amount of challenge, and an extreme amount of real responsibility in terms of leadership for young people who are craving being able to participate in society. They want to be seen desperately, and LEAD is a space that wants to see them, right? It wants to look at them. I was driving down Market Street the other day, and I saw a young lady who, I know what she's been doing, but she hasn't been able to come to school. The pandemic has, created some family dynamics that keep her from engaging in her academic pursuits right now. She's taking care of her siblings. Grandmother has had COVID. It's been a really tough year and some change. So I see her downtown, and, just like we always do, how YouthBuild does, I stop my car in the middle of Market Street.
Yes.
Hey,
that's it. That's
right.
it.
What are you doing?
Yes.
What's up? I haven't seen you in so long. What's up? Right. And then there's that look of embarrassment because they feel like we're going to immediately jump on them about not matriculating. But like, how you doing? I know you've been going through a lot, sis. Right. Like, and you don't call me anymore. Like, what's going on with that? Right. Like, you could come by, even if you can't, right, really stay. Like, just check in. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, Price, you're right. I'm going to do that. And then 2 days later, she texts me like, yo, how you doing? Right. Yeah. We are a community-based organization that focuses on leadership development, the tangible skills that young people come out with, right? And, a lot of folks want to focus on, high school graduation, right, as the main tool. But this platform allows me to say that leadership development is the primary tool, right? Their growth is the tool, right? That's our function. The academic matriculation, whether it be high school diploma or high school equivalency, and the CTEs, allied health, construction, and technology, are really tools that they can use when they become better people to take care of themselves, their family, and their community. Right? That's what we want to try to do. So spread the word about us. Make sure that as many people as possible know about us. We are actively recruiting young people for the fall right now. We're offering what's going to be, like almost a full year of programming, right? We're really aiming towards, creating like a hub for young people to be able to come and just, heal. So just spread the word about us. I know Ms. Berry shared my number, the office number of the building, the website where you can apply, where you can gather more information. You can also check in with me if you have any questions. She asked me before we got on about whether my phone number could go on the stream, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that. If you want to text me whenever, I will always respond.
Yes, I love this partnership going on, right? This is what Sidewalk Talk is all about. Shout out NCST want a partner. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say the street team are our people. So just reach out to me and let me know what you got going on. When we get back in the building, then we're going to need y'all again for sure.
We chilling on the Sidewalk Talk tonight, Price. That's what it's all about, though. So I appreciate you. In the next frame, it will have all the information, your phone number, the website, the school's phone number. So all of that will, is in the next frame. But I do just want to say before you go, and I do this with every guest, like giving your flowers to you now, right? Like I super appreciate you, and not just me, that have learned so much from you, and a lot of the people on the comments have learned so much from you. But this work is not easy, and it's a lot of ups and downs, and it does take a lot of patience and pain while guiding folks through their journey of transformation. planting seeds and wondering where the harvest is. I mean, there's some dark moments in this work, and I just, it's a lot of sacrifice that you have done to dedicate your life to this work. The parking on West Market, like the hugs at a red light that we do, like this is not a job. This is not a job. This is a life work, and I just super want to acknowledge that in this space of you, and this village would not be the same without you. You are an asset to the community. Mark said the price is always right. I would agree. And so we just salute you and appreciate you coming to this space and teaching us more about what you know. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. And if I could, and again, like Mark, like Komasanyas tells me, sometimes we preach into the choir. So I think I may be preaching to the choir in this case. But if folks hear this later in the stream, I think too that when you do this work well, there are ups and downs, but the ups are so up, like it's amazing and it's replenishing, right? And like the running joke at Lead is that I'm super old, but that I look like I did 20 years ago, and I think that's partially because I get to engage every day in watching young people and our staff as well grow and develop in ways that are just beautiful. And I don't think there's another job really that allows for that at the volume that we get, right? I get teary-eyed every time I think about the young person who's starting their own business. Even as when I get as sad as I get when a young person has a major fail, right? But I know that all of it is a part of a process, and I kind of see it as keeping me healthy. Right. So if you're going to do youth development, you got to see it as a lifestyle process, as Ms. Berry said. This is really what we do for the rest of our lives. And me very well. I treat my children this way. I'm a baseball coach. I coach the other kids this way. And although a lot of other people don't understand it, it works.
Yeah.
It works well when you do it right.
Yeah. And to your point, to encourage also other providers watching that even the smallest harvest is replenishing. And we don't take harvest for granted. And so exactly, she said, when you love what you do, it's not work, it's the investment in our future. Absolutely.
Yes.
We're out here doing that. And oh gosh, people, praise may the force be with you. And thank you so much for all of your work and value into this space. It was class time for us. So thank you.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
And thanks everybody who came and listened.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
You too.
Wow, family. Wow. So we appreciate Darrell Price. I want to quickly summarize the call to action, because Sidewalk Talk is about action. Like, we do talk and we process through these topics, but we also want to just summarize the call to action because we don't want to just talk, right? It's action time as well. So call to action number 1 is right here. Support Price's work, right? By referring an opportunity youth to Lead Charter School. The phone number is here, as well as filling out an application online at leadcharterschool.org, and one of their staff members will follow up with the person that fills out the application. If you do have questions about lead programming, then you can also reach Darrell Price directly. The phone number is over there. And yes, his number is in the streets. And that is community-based work as well. But if you've kind of been listening throughout this episode, that's the brand. That's the brand of this particular organization. And we've had a guest here on Sidewalk Talk from the organization as well. And so refer a youth, right? Refer a youth that you want someone to see the best in them. And that leads me to kind of a piece of call to action is for us to not overlook or misunderstand behaviors of our young people. We need to be able to look underneath these behaviors and then cultivate them for leadership. We have to be able to identify them as leaders, to then convince them that they can be leaders, and that they can repurpose their power, repurpose their identity in a way that can be used to shake the ground, right? Like our young people, as one of the sisters said, like, is our future. The young people are our future, and the young people we're talking about tonight are often misunderstood, and assumptions are being made about their lives, but leadership is the way to go. And so Price has taught us kind of how to do that, looking under the behaviors, empowering them, using patience, family, and then programmatically, right, making sure that our outcomes align with the journey of transformation. How are we measuring the journey of transformation, and then getting funding to match, you know, our data in that area? So bringing all of this together, making sure that folks are trained, making sure that providers, we are looking at ourselves, that we are taking a mirror and looking at ourselves, checking our own ego, relinquishing power and control, right? A lot of this stuff, half of this episode was not only about young people, but half of this episode was about us. Was about us, the providers, and making sure that we are, as he said earlier, eating some humble pie, right? Being vulnerable at times, using courage, trusting the process. We trusting the process. We can't tell young people trust the process and we don't trust the process ourselves, right? So that is some of the call to action, family. Again, my name is Aaliyah Berry. I'm a community-based social worker here in Newark. I work as a full-time consultant with Seeds and Berries. So you can follow Seeds and Berries on Facebook and Instagram. Myself, Aaliyah Berry, on LinkedIn. If you missed this episode, you can watch it on YouTube. And Seeds and Berries has different episodes. We have already had several episodes already, so you can find those on the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. You can also find out more about my services at seedsandberries.com. So that is how you can find me. Please like and tag and share this particular episode. We want this to go far and wide, not for popularity, but definitely for impact. Send young people over to Lead Charter School around that way, and I will see you next time. The question is, when is next time, right? So next time, the month of June, we are going to honor Father's Day, right? And so I have a couple dynamic guests that are coming in the month of June that are going to be talking about raising the village's children, right? Girls and boys at home, in school, and on the sidewalk, right? How should men be raising girls? How should women be raising boys? And vice versa. All children need to be raised by all adults. And so we're going to talk about that in June. Where are our children being raised, right? Schools, homes, sidewalks, by who and how? And we're going to have some real talk, some nuanced conversation about that. At the end of the day, though, Sidewalk Talk is about finding your lane, playing your part, and that's the action step at the end of the day. Thank you for your support on tonight. My name is Aaliyah Berry. Have a good night.